Following the death of King Viserys in 132 AC, the Green faction, headed by the Queen and Hand of the King Sir Otto Hightower, usurped the Iron Throne, declaring Alicent's eldest son, Aegon, King of Westeros, while on Dragonstone, the Black faction crowned the chosen heir Rhaenyra, beginning the Dance of the Dragon civil war. Seeking allies, the Queen sent her eldest son Jacaerys on diplomatic missions to the Vale and North, while her second son Lucerys failed to win over the Stormlands, and was attacked by his uncle Aemond One-Eye in the dance over Shipbreaker Bay. Though Aemond only meant to harass and bully the boy, Vhagar proved overly aggressive, resulting in the death of Lucerys and his dragon Arrax. Meanwhile, Jacaerys successfully won over the Vale by promising a dragon to protect their territory and forged a friendship with Lord Cregan Stark of Winterfell, joining him on a visit to the Wall, where the North pledged to support the Queen but could not send a great army until winter had passed. Yet Jacaerys made clear the urgency of their need, and so Lord Stark agreed to immediately send a smaller army of 2,000 Winter Wolves, well-honed elders who would fight hard for the Blacks. Yet the triumph of Jacaerys was soured when he learned his brother Lucerys was killed. Back on Dragonstone, Rhaenyra's grief left her unable to fulfill any responsibilities as queen, instead flying on Syrax to search for the remains of her son. Frustrated nothing could be done without his wife, the king consort Daemon Targaryen tried to order their ally Rhaenys to aid him in attacking the capital, where their dragons Caraxes the Bloodworm and Meleys the Red Queen might have a chance against Vhagar. But Rhaenys refused to obey as he was not the ruling monarch. When at last the queen found the remnants of Lucerys, she brought him back to Dragonstone, where she learned House Velaryon set up a sea blockade of the capital, and Daemon was ready to start an army in the Riverlands. Ignoring these developments, she wanted Aemond held to account, comforted Jace upon his return, and held a funeral for her deceased son. Realizing his wife could not focus on the war, Daemon saw an opportunity to seek vengeance on her behalf when told his former lover, Mysaria the White Worm, was arrested trying to leave the capital as a stowaway on a ship. With the help of this once powerful underworld spy master, Daemon snuck into King's Landing and made contact with Blood, a Hightower-hating gold cloak, and Cheese, a rat catcher familiar with the tunnel system under the Red Keep, promising great rewards if they could infiltrate the castle and murder Aemond Targaryen, as this would be a son for a son. When asked what to do if Aemond could not be reached, Daemon possibly gave secondary instructions. Sneaking into the castle, Blood and Cheese did not find Aemond, but eventually found Queen Helaena and her twins Jacaerys and Jaehaera, threatening her life until she revealed which was her son. Blood then cut off his head and they escaped, while Helaena took the girl and walked in on her mother Alicent in bed with the Lord Commander of the Kingsguard, Sir Criston Cole, somberly announcing they killed the boy. After a night of chaos, the Green Small Council met, and in spite of the king's reluctance, held a public funeral procession, both to inspire hatred for Rhaenyra the Cruel and garner support from the population. Though King Aegon had little interest or aptitude for administration, he showed signs of empathy when addressing the petitions of his subjects, but that all fell away upon the death of his son, as Aegon raged, demanding bloody vengeance. When Larys Strong announced they apprehended Blood trying to leave the city with the head of his victim, Aegon allowed for a brief interrogation to learn he was hired by Daemon and worked with a rat catcher whose name was not known. Once the information was given, Aegon beat the man to death and ordered all city rat catchers hanged, which included the other assailant, Cheese. Feeling shame for his dereliction of duty, Sir Criston Cole lashed out and projected his guilt upon the Kingsguard, Sir Auric Cargyll, ordering him to assassinate Rhaenyra by posing as his twin brother Sir Eric, who served in the Queensguard on Dragonstone. Thrilled to hear of this mission, the king's joy was spoiled by Sir Otto Hightower, who berated his grandson, not only for this foolish mission doomed to failure, but also because he hanged so many innocent rat catchers, losing all the goodwill they bought with the funeral procession. As Hand of the King, Otto advocated for patience, slowly gathering allies and raising armies in the Reach and Westerlands, while Queen Mother Alicent still hoped for a peaceful solution, sending Rhaenyra a message of consolation and regret for the death of Lucerys. Though Otto and Alicent were at odds over past mistakes, they soon agreed to work together as voices of reason on the small council. Yet Aegon did not see the value in his grandfather's wisdom, and so after his admonishment, stripped Otto of his rank to name Criston Cole Hand of the King. Shocked and outraged, Otto informed Alicent he would leave for Old Town to prepare his youngest grandson Daemon Targaryen for a position of leadership in the war to come. Alicent, meanwhile, would try and convince the king he must return Otto to his position as Hand. Over on Dragonstone, Rhaenyra faced accusations from her own small council, as everyone believed she was behind the assassination of Jacaerys. Yet upon seeing Daemon's smirk, she realized the truth, and when meeting in private, had an enormous argument, in which he claimed his target was Aemond, and killing the child was a mistake. Rhaenyra struggled to believe it, and accused him of disloyalty. Angered by her words, Daemon mounted Caraxes and left for the Riverlands, where he originally planned to raise an army for the queen, but now considered claiming the crown for himself. Losing her most valuable dragon rider, Rhaenyra started to rely more heavily on the others, assigning Daemon's daughter Baela to scout the capital and surrounding lands on her young dragon Moondancer. Though Ser Auric found no honor in his assignment, he was duty-bound to obey, and so successfully infiltrated Dragonstone, only to be spotted by Mysaria, who reported him to the guards. Making it all the way to Rhaenyra's room, Ser Auric was interrupted by his brother Ser Eric, engaging in the legendary Duel of the Cargyll twins, where Ser Eric killed his brother, apologized to the queen, and took his own life. Horrified by her near assassination, Rhaenyra sent her younger children, Joffrey, Aegon, and Viserys to safety in the Vale, along with Tyraxus, Stormcloud, and 4 dragon eggs. As Daemon's younger daughter Rhaena was not a dragon rider, she was given charge of the mission, ordered to act as a mother to the children and next generation of dragons. Despite the bloodshed thus far, Rhaenyra was reluctant to start the war in earnest, earning contempt and mockery from her counselors who saw her as weak, encouraging some of their beliefs that a woman was not fit for leadership in wartime. Even Jacaerys was dismayed by her inaction, though his loyalty did not allow him to voice concerns. When Baela reported green soldiers marching through the Crownlands, the council urged the use of dragons, as the Blacks had Syrax, Caraxes, Meleys, Vermax, and Moondancer ready for combat, while the Greens had only Vhagar and Sunfire, as young Tessarion in the Reach was untested, and powerful Dreamfire was bonded to Helaena, who was in no way a warrior. Still, Rhaenyra refused to press her advantage, fearing the use of dragons would unleash a level of devastation that could not be undone. Ignoring her counselors and son, the queen instead worked with Mysaria, concocting a plan to dress Rhaenyra as a septa and smuggle her into the capital, accompanied only by the Lord Commander of her Queen's Guard, Sir Steffon Darklyn. Knowing Alicent Hightower often prayed at the Great Sept, Rhaenyra held her at knife point so they might speak of a possible end to the war. Shocked and confused by her presence, Alicent made it clear she had little power in the small council, and peace was no longer an option. Nevertheless, she allowed a disheartened Rhaenyra to leave without consequence. Unable to find the queen, the Black Council grew restless and indignant by her continued failure as a leader, only settling down when Lord Corlys arrived and demanded calm. When Rhaenyra at last returned, the council grew ever more perplexed and angry when she explained her absence was due to a failed and extremely risky mission of peace to the capital. Though House Velaryon supported the queen, they also struggled with their own problems, as Rhaenys insisted Corlys must name a new heir to Driftmark, choosing between their grandchildren, Joffrey Velaryon and Rhaena Targaryen. But he hesitated, knowing there may be other options as well, having fathered Addam and Alyn, 2 illegitimate boys in the town of Hull. Alyn even proved his worth as a sailor after saving the life of Corlys during the War for the Stepstones. But the Sea Snake was reluctant to offer reward and elevation, fearing his wife might learn the truth. Nevertheless, it was not long before Rhaenys met Alyn and immediately recognized her husband in his features. Though upset, she did not take it out on his son, and even argued on his behalf, stating he deserved recognition for his heroism. Over in the capital, the new hand Sir Criston Cole presented a plan devised with Aemond to march their army through the Crownlands, growing their forces by defeating Black allied houses before reaching Harrenhal to secure the loyalty of the Riverlands. Though Aegon was eager to join them on Sunfire, they explained the king could not risk his own life, but he was quick to suspect they simply did not believe in his abilities as a warrior. Growing angry and resentful, Aegon tried on the armor of his namesake, Aegon the Conqueror, and grew closer to Larys Strong, naming him Master of Whisperers. Considering his options, Aegon went out drinking with his oafish friends he named to the King's Guard, ending up at a brothel where they found Aemond in bed with the same prostitute to whom he lost his virginity as a child. As Aegon mocked and humiliated his brother in front of the others, who dared not laugh, Aemond stewed with anger before departing. As for Sir Criston Cole, he asked for the favor of his lover the Queen Mother before leading the army out of the city, accompanied by Sir Gawain Hightower, brother to Alicent and son of Sir Otto. Successfully converting the houses Rosby and Stokeworth from black to green, they next sacked the city of Duskendale and beheaded their lord before marching on Rook's Rest, a small castle headed by Lord Staunton, who served on Rhaenyra's small council. Although Aemond tried to explain their plan to Aegon, stating the castle was easily won and would cut Rhaenyra off from the mainland, the king was upset they plotted behind his back and demanded they instead take Harrenhal. Seizing the opportunity to repay his brother's mockery and demonstrate his superior intellect, Aemond replied in fluent High Valyrian, to which Aegon could not properly reply, embarrassing him in front of the council. Angry and humiliated, Aegon next spoke to his mother, who felt ill because of the moon tea she drank to avoid pregnancy, and as a result offered no consolation to her son, instead berating him for his foolish attitude and dismissal of Otto Hightower. Reaching his breaking point, Aegon showed a moment of vulnerability by sincerely asking for his mother's advice, to which she coldly replied he should do nothing, implying he was of no use to the kingdom. Realizing his own family did not respect him, Aegon grew ever more angry, bitter, and drunk, making the reckless decision to don his armor and fly Sunfire into battle without informing anyone. To the north, the army of Criston Cole reached Rook's Rest, where Lord Staunton sent a message to Dragonstone pleading for aid. While Rhaenyra bravely offered to fight herself, the queen's life could not be risked, and so Rhaenys volunteered to fly Meleys into battle. Expecting a response from Dragonstone, the Green Army laid a trap by sending ground forces first, while Aemond and Vhagar hid some distance away, ready to emerge when necessary. Yet much to the surprise of everyone, it was not Aemond who challenged Rhaenys, but Aegon on Sunfire, as they disrupted the plan by thoughtlessly flying straight to Rook's Rest. Realizing she faced a fool, Rhaenys and Meleys made quick work of the enemy, slashing, tearing, and breathing fire upon them. Though the victory of Rhaenys was nearly spoiled when Aemond and Vhagar suddenly appeared, they instead betrayed their king with a devastating fire attack that sent both Aegon and Sunfire crashing to the ground. Receiving a temporary respite from battle, Rhaenys had this one chance to escape back to Dragonstone, but in the end decided to stay and defend their ally, defiantly pressing the attack against Vhagar, the oldest and largest of the Targaryen dragons. Though she fought bravely, Vhagar eventually bit the neck of Meleys and ended her life, knocking Rhaenys out of the sky and to her death. On the ground, many soldiers from both sides were killed in the wreckage of this dragon battle, but with the fall of Meleys, the Greens took the advantage and stormed the enemy castle, all save Criston Cole, who seemed traumatized by what he saw, and frantically rode to the king, where he found Aemond with sword in hand. Though Aegon and Sunfire remained alive, they were badly wounded and burned, requiring immediate medical attention. While the nobles fought battles and played their Game of Thrones, the Smallfolk of the capital suffered from the blockade, forcing the blacksmith Hugh to petition the crown for coin to continue their work. Though the crown agreed, no coin ever came, and Hugh grew increasingly upset he could not provide for his wife and sick daughter. Facing struggles of his own, Ulf, another commoner with white hair, told stories for free drinks, with his most popular tale describing his supposed dragonseed lineage as the bastard son of Balon the Brave, making him a half-brother to King Viserys, which was why he claimed loyalty to his niece Queen Rhaenyra. As all this went on, the Riverlands was already at war, beginning with the Battle of the Burning Mill, where the ancient enemy houses Blackwood and Bracken faced a border dispute, and so used the conflict as an excuse for open hostilities, with the Blackwoods declaring for Rhaenyra while the Brackens stood for King Aegon. The result was a slaughter with no clear winner, and so hostilities only escalated. Meanwhile, Daemon Targaryen made his own plans for the Riverlands, arriving at Harrenhal upon Caraxes, where the Castellan Sir Simon Strong immediately surrendered and bent the knee to Queen Rhaenyra, claiming no loyalty to the Greens or his nephew Lord Larys Strong, as they accurately suspected he murdered his own father and brother. Though Daemon was slow to trust, he soon faced the unexpected challenge of strange dreams and visions, seeing young Rhaenyra sewing back on the head of Jacaerys, while stating she must always clean up his messes. Unable to sleep properly, Daemon went for a walk and ran into Alice Rivers, a bastard of House Strong, castle healer and possible woods witch, who informed the king she foresaw he would die in this place. The visions then continued, and he next saw young Rhaenyra on the Iron Throne, speaking words he did not want to hear, which did not stop even after he cut her head off. Seeking to meet the Lord Paramount of the Riverlands, Daemon was instead introduced to young Oscar Tully, the heir to Riverrun, who arrived in place of his ailing grandfather. Upon realizing this boy had no actual authority, Daemon casually suggested he kill his own grandfather, and when Oscar refused, the king rudely dismissed him and instead sent for the leader of House Blackwood, as they already shed blood for Queen Rhaenyra. Yet again, his plans were interrupted by unwanted dreams, and even after receiving a sleeping draft from Alice Rivers, he was left barely functional during his meeting with Regent Willem Blackwood, representing his young nephew, Lord Benjacob Blackwood. During their discussion, Daemon saw visions of his deceased wife, Laena Velaryon, but in the end, composed himself enough to make a deal where House Blackwood offered their support in exchange for helping defeat and subdue House Bracken. Following their defeat in the battle at Rook's Rest, the Black Council of Queen Rhaenyra criticized her for raising no ground armies and driving away her husband, Daemon Targaryen, who was actively recruiting soldiers. Most vocal of all was Sir Alfred Broome, who spoke ill of women for not studying warfare, while she replied his own training was merely theoretical as he had not actually experienced combat. Though Rhaenyra sent support to her allies in Maidenpool and Crackclaw Point, instructing them to increase their garrisons, the Black Council was not satisfied and began to argue among themselves, leaving the Queen unable to control her people or demand respect. Frustrated his mother would not allow him to participate in the war, Jacaerys convinced his betrothed Baela Targaryen to cover for him while he departed for the Riverlands on his own initiative, where he successfully negotiated with House Frey, offering them Harrenhal and the protection of their dragons in exchange for military support and the use of their bridge to transport soldiers from the north. Retreating from her small council, Rhaenyra instead sought advice from her spy master Mysaria, who suggested they exploit the discontent of Smallfolk in the capital caused by their blockade, sending a servant to provoke them with rumors of the Greens enjoying luxuries while the commoners starved, then amplifying this propaganda with shipments of food featuring the Queen's banner, masterfully turning the population against Aegon II. Realizing her most influential supporter, Corlys Velaryon, was devastated after the loss of Rhaenys, the Queen sent his granddaughter Baela to appoint him Hand of the Queen, convincing him to stay loyal for sake of his wife who died for their cause. Corlys was so impressed by her words he wanted Baela as his heir, but she claimed to be fire and blood, while Driftmark required salt and sea. Considering her words, Corlys promoted his illegitimate son Alyn to first mate of his flagship the Sea Snake, which was undergoing repairs and when completed was renamed the Queen Who Never Was. Understanding she must start making more consequential decisions, Rhaenyra cleverly sent Sir Alfred Broome to establish contact with Daemon in the Riverlands, thereby removing her most vocal detractor from the small council, while engaging in necessary diplomacy with her husband, whose loyalty was uncertain. Yet even after a series of wise decisions, the Queen needed to secure a more substantial advantage to counter the threat of Vhagar, and after a discussion with her son Jacaerys, decided to seek out noble-born dragon seeds, hoping those with trace amounts of Targaryen blood might succeed in bonding a dragon to fight on her behalf. Researching bloodlines, she discovered the Lord Commander of her Queen's Guard, Sir Steffon Darklyn, was a candidate, as his grandmother's grandmother Arianna was a Targaryen princess. Without hesitation, Sir Steffon accepted the mission, and alongside the Dragon Keepers, participated in a bonding ritual with Seasmoke, who at first seemed receptive, but ultimately rejected the claimant and burned him alive. Shaken by this loss, Rhaenyra continued to seek counsel almost exclusively from Mysaria, who revealed the trauma of her childhood in which she was abused by her father. Growing closer, the two began a secret relationship, but were interrupted by the Queen's Guard, who revealed Seasmoke was spotted with an unknown rider. Fearing the Greens had a new ally, Rhaenyra mounted Syrax and flew to confront this potential enemy, but instead discovered the dragon chose Addam of Hull, a common-born man from Driftmark, as his rider. The secret, illegitimate son of Lord Corlys, Addam was quick to bend the knee and offer his services to the Queen, who readily accepted, and after another discussion with Mysaria, concluded they must search among the Smallfolk for those with Targaryen blood, in the hope others might duplicate the success of her new dragon rider. Learning what occurred, Corlys congratulated Addam and informed Alyn, even offering him a chance to tame a dragon of his own. But the young man only ever sought to be a sailor, proudly declaring himself salt and sea. Though impressed by his words, Corlys quickly tired of Alyn's negative attitude, seeming ungrateful for his promotion and the opportunities being offered. Upon hearing this complaint, Alyn's suppressed anger finally bubbled to the surface, explaining he grew up watching Corlys and his family living in luxury while he and his brothers struggled every day, receiving no aid or acknowledgement from their father. Yet only now that his legitimate children and grandson were dead did he offer the crumbs of his favor, thus why Alyn had no interest in any offers of help. Similarly, Rhaenyra was soon confronted by her own son, Jacaerys, who argued it was a mistake to seek Dragonriders among the Smallfolk, as it would greatly harm Targaryen prestige, which alongside the rumors of his bastard birth, threatened his legitimacy and position as heir. Although the queen failed to reassure her son, Jace instead found strength from his betrothed Baela Targaryen, who reminded him he was not the first nobleman sired under unusual circumstances, encouraging him to prove his worth and earn his place as the future king of Westeros. Using her contacts to locate bastard-born Smallfolk of Targaryen blood, Mysaria brought a group of candidates from the capital, including Ulf the White and Hugh Hammer, who recently lost his daughter to illness and confessed his mother was Sarah Targaryen, the disavowed daughter of King Jacaerys who worked as a prostitute. Outraged by the queen's audacity, the Dragon Keepers refused to participate in the sowing of the seeds, leaving Rhaenyra to navigate the event on her own, explaining their purpose before sending all the candidates at once to attempt bonding the great dragon Vermithor, formerly claimed by King Jacaerys Targaryen. Rejecting the first man to approach, Vermithor burned many of the Smallfolk and guards, creating such chaos those who survived quickly scattered and fled. Yet upon seeing Vermithor about to harm a defenseless woman, Hugh Hammer caused a distraction and saved her life, directly challenging the dragon, who was impressed by his courage and accepted his claim. Yet Hugh was not the only dragon seed to find success, as Ulf the White fled the carnage only to stumble into the lair of Silverwing, the maid of Vermithor, formerly ridden by Queen Alicent Targaryen. Stepping on an egg and tripping into a puddle of piss, Ulf somehow impressed the she-dragon who accepted his bond. As all this went on, the Greens celebrated their victory at Rook's Rest by parading the head of Meleys through the streets of the capital, yet it had the opposite effect they intended, as the Smallfolk saw an ill omen, fearing Rhaenyra's response to this outrage. Horrified to learn the fate of her son, Alicent watched the maesters treat his burns and severe wounds, unable to learn the truth of what occurred, as even her lover Criston Cole repeated the lie Aegon fought bravely and fell in battle with Rhaenys. Attending a meeting of the Small Council, the Queen Mother attempted to name herself regent, but found support only from Grand Maester Orwyle, with even her closest allies, Larys Strong and Criston Cole, voting for Aemond as the king's heir, stating they could not deny Rhaenyra's claim only to elevate a woman as their leader. Eagerly accepting the regency, Aemond soon received a letter from Lord Jason Lannister, who stated he would keep his army at the border of the Riverlands until joined by Vhagar. Offended by his demands, Aemond sent back orders to continue marching forward, while also sending Criston Cole with what remained of their forces, thereby attacking Harrenhal in a pincer move from west and south, promising to join them on his dragon when the time was ripe. The regent also decided to send Jason's twin, Tyrion Lannister, on a mission to the Triarchy of Essos, where he promised trade rights to King's Landing, and relinquished the Westerosi claim to the Stepstones in exchange for a fleet to break the Velaryon blockade. During his time in Essos, Tyrion befriended Sharako Lohar, the eccentric admiral of the Triarchy Fleet, and together set sail for King's Landing. Learning his brother Aegon was slowly recovering, Aemond subtly threatened further harm, prompting the king to claim no memory of what occurred at Rook's Rest. Hoping to take advantage of the new power dynamic in the capital, Larys Strong sought to be selected as the new hand of the king, only for the regent to mock his ambitions, instead sending for his grandfather, Sir Otto Hightower, to retake the position. Yet this proved impossible, as Otto was taken captive by unknown assailants sometime after leaving the capital. Embarrassed and enraged by Aemond's flippant dismissal, Larys changed tactics and re-established contact with the king, preventing addiction to milk of the poppy while teaching him the harsh reality of living with a disability. Working with Grand Maester Orwyle, they rehabilitated Aegon to one day retake the throne, at which point he would no doubt continue to rely on Larys Strong as his closest advisor. Reluctantly accepting Aemond as regent, Alicent started to panic upon realizing the realm was in the hands of her violent, vengeance-obsessed son, and upon vocalizing her reservations, was swiftly dismissed from the small council. Told to focus on more domestic pursuits, the Queen Mother bid farewell to her brother Gwayne Hightower as he marched for the Riverlands, but said nothing to Criston Cole, merely exchanging a silent look before they parted. En route to Harrenhal, Gwayne confronted Sir Criston at sword point, accusing him of breaking his vows with Alicent. Yet the Lord Commander proved a broken shell of his former self, explaining she saved his life on 2 occasions, and so entirely devoted himself to her, though it no longer mattered, as they would likely die on campaign. Sir Gwayne was so shocked by Criston's self-loathing and nihilistic attitude, he lowered his sword and made peace with the situation. As tensions bubbled over in the capital, both Helaena and Alicent were accosted by angry Smallfolk while leaving the Great Sept, a small altercation which turned into a full-blown riot when one of the poorly trained Kingsguard killed a commoner and was in turn slaughtered by the mob. Barely escaping with their lives, Alicent heard cries of Queen Rhaenyra as they fled to the castle. Struggling to accept her diminished responsibilities, Alicent camped out in the forest to reflect on the next stage of her life. Back in the Red Keep, the Iron Rod Lord Jasper Wilde heard rumor the dragon Seasmoke had a new rider, and so consulted Larys Strong, seeking his advice as Master of Whispers. Upon learning the report passed through multiple people before reaching them, Larys suggested they say nothing, possibly fearing the wrath of Aemond, regardless if it was true or not. Yet this decision soon resulted in serious consequences, as the regent was caught completely unprepared when Ulf the White rode Silverwing directly over King's Landing, which then provoked Aemond to mount Vhagar and fly to Dragonstone, where he was shocked to see multiple dragons and Dragonriders, forcing him to flee as Rhaenyra watched defiantly with Syrax, Vermithor, and Silverwing at her back. Furious to have lost his advantage, Aemond responded by burning Black Allied Sharppoint, during which time Larys snuck King Aegon out of the city to Braavos, where they could live off the wealth of House Strong, explaining the regent was enraged and might take out his frustration on the king. Thus they must evacuate, in the hope Aemond and Rhaenyra destroy each other, at which time Aegon could return and take his place on the Iron Throne. Desperate for more Dragonriders, Aemond attempted to force his sister Helaena to mount Dreamfire, one of the oldest and most powerful dragons alive, but the queen refused and was defended by her mother Alicent, as Helaena had a fragile mind and was in no way a warrior. Back on Dragonstone, Rhaenyra thought simply possessing more Dragonriders might force the enemy into submission, but after speaking with Corlys Velaryon, realized she must fight to secure victory. Organizing a dinner with her new Dragonriders, she promised knighthood in exchange for their service. Yet while both Hugh and Addam showed humility and respect, Ulf the White acted without civility, angering Jacaerys, who twice corrected his behavior. It was during their dinner that Rhaenyra received a letter from Sir Simon Strong, a loyal servant who warned Daemon Targaryen might be plotting treason by raising armies for his own claim rather than that of the queen. Alarmed, Rhaenyra mounted Syrax and flew to Harrenhal, bringing Addam and Seasmoke instead of her son and heir. Over in the Riverlands, after Daemon Targaryen made a deal with House Blackwood, he attempted to intimidate House Bracken by threatening Dragonfire, but they steadfastly refused to submit, impressing the king consort who wanted them recruited rather than destroyed, instructing Sir Willem Blackwood to wage a campaign of total war, burning and pillaging religious septs and farmland while slaughtering their peasants, including women and children. Though these tactics succeeded in defeating the Brackens, Daemon faced backlash from the other river lords, who denounced such barbarity and refused to follow a leader that sanctioned such behavior. Meanwhile, the rogue prince continued to suffer disturbing dreams and visions, seeing himself engage intimately with his own mother, as well as several incidents with his brother, including Viserys on the Iron Throne, repeating words from past confrontations, mourning his deceased wife Aemma Arryn, and as a sickly old man talking about the crushing weight of the crown. Despite trying to ignore these visions, Daemon struggled to function normally, showing little patience or competence when dealing with the administration of Harrenhal, learning from Simon Strong they were in need of coin for castle repairs and preparations for war. Though Sir Simon suggested contacting the Queen for assistance, Daemon refused, insisting he would secure funding on his own. Seeking advice from the healer Alice Rivers, she declared it a mistake to unleash such devastation against House Bracken, but eventually instructed him to wait 3 more days and the tide would turn in his favor. During this time, Alice Rivers traveled to Riverrun, supposedly to help Lord Grover Tully, but instead caused his death, allowing young Oscar Tully to succeed his grandfather and meet with Daemon about supporting the Blacks. Yet while the boy was young and inexperienced, he proved remarkably wise and cunning, expertly belittling Daemon while also manipulating the situation to denounce the extreme tactics used against House Bracken, thus gaining the respect of the other River Lords while forcing Daemon to punish Willem Blackwood in exchange for their support. Embarrassed, outmatched, and outmaneuvered by Oscar Tully, Daemon saw no alternative and so beheaded the Regent of House Blackwood, betraying his most loyal ally to win the army he so desperately desired. As their warriors gathered at Harrenhal, Daemon was visited by Sir Alfred Broome, originally sent on behalf of Rhaenyra, only to betray her by encouraging Daemon to declare himself king. Overhearing their conversation, Sir Simon wrote to Rhaenyra, prompting her and Addam of Hull to depart Dragonstone for the Riverlands. Yet before she arrived, Daemon, with the help of Alice Rivers, touched a weirwood tree to see a final vision featuring the Song of Ice and Fire prophecy, including images of war with the White Walkers, Daenerys Targaryen with her dragons, and his wife Rhaenyra on the Iron Throne. When the vision ended, Daemon made peace with his inner demons and understood his true destiny, realizing he must serve the Queen and fight for her cause so the realm would be prepared to face a future invasion that'll threaten all of humanity. Confronted by Rhaenyra, Daemon offered no resistance and readily bent the knee, promising his support before delivering an enthusiastic speech to his men, declaring they fight for their queen as the army cheered in response. Relieved she now had a ground army, Rhaenyra returned to Dragonstone, where she was unexpectedly visited by the Queen Mother, Alicent Hightower, who felt depressed after losing her position of authority, and so snuck out of the capital with a single Kingsguard companion to betray her own family by submitting to the Blacks. At first, she offered to surrender the capital when Aemond flew to the Riverlands, but Rhaenyra also demanded the death of King Aegon. Though hesitant, Alicent agreed to help murder the son she put on the throne in exchange for her own life and that of her daughter Helaena. As all this went on, Rhaena Targaryen struggled with her mission in the Vale, facing backlash from Lady Jane Arryn, who offered support in exchange for a dragon to protect her territory, but was instead given 2 babies, Tyraxis and Stormcloud, incapable of large-scale combat. Unhappy with her position and past failure to tame a dragon, Rhaena soon learned Lady Jane sought protection because there was already a wild dragon roaming the Vale. Successfully contacting the Prince of Pentos, the Targaryen children were sent to safety across the Narrow Sea, but Rhaena instead ran away from her responsibilities, leaving her brothers on their own while she sped away, searching for and eventually finding the wild dragon to once again attempt forming a bond. Thus, after weeks of slow preparation, the continent was at last on the verge of open warfare, including the Green-allied Triarchy Fleet sailing from Essos, the Hightower army marching through the Reach alongside Daemon Targaryen on Tessarion, the Lannister host marching into the Riverlands from the west, while Criston Cole's forces did the same from the south, and Aemond One-Eye ever ready to fight on Vhagar. At the same time, the Blacks made their own moves, including the continued Velaryon blockade of the capital, House Beesbury aiming to counter the Hightowers in the Reach, Daemon's host forming at Harrenhal, House Frey and the Winter Wolves marching from the north, and the Dragonriders, Rhaenyra, Jacaerys, Baela, Addam of Hull, Hugh Hammer, and Ulf the White preparing for combat. A special thanks to all those who contribute to Civilization X, like Raj the Jar, Barachado, Sir Rick Lone, and Lady J Book Nerd. If you'd like to help the channel, be sure to give a like, leave a comment, subscribe, and click on the links below, or else go to patreon.com/civilizationx, where you can gain early access to videos, vote on future content, and watch the Patreon-only series, Heroes of Lore and Legend.